Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be checking out Warhammer Fantasy Lore, IKIT CLAW, the Chief Warlock Engineer of Clan Skryre. Now this is uploaded by Arch and this was recommended to me by our Prefect Andrew. So big thank you to Andrew for this week's recommendation. As always, do appreciate that a lot, man. And yeah, this is obviously a Skaven clan. They're the only people I think in Warhammer Fantasy that really call themselves clans outside of like ogres and stuff. But you know, Skaven obviously have some pretty recognizable names, and IKIT CLAW, I mean, come on, give me a break, you know what I'm saying? Also reading the description here as well. Inventor of the Doom Wheel and the magical miracle mixture for hair regrowth. Sounds like something Skaven would do. Sounds like something radical. So, but I don't really know who this character is. I've never really heard of him before. Really don't know much about the Skaven at all, I have to say. So I don't really have too much more to say about the character, what we're going to be getting into here. I know what Arch makes. I know he makes fantastic content. We've checked him out a bit before on the channel. I've checked him out a little bit on my own time as well. He makes fantastic content. So without any further delay, I'm excited to get right into this one. If you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe for more content from me, and of course leave your recommendations down in the comments below. Join the Discord, of course, if you're not in it. And yeah, big thank you to all of our members as well. Really appreciate it, guys. Without any further delay, 3 2 1, let's get it, boys.
Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to more Warhammer Fantasy Lore, where today we are going to be talking about one of the finest, prettiest, mightiest, strongest Skaven of them all, Chief Warlock Engineer of Clan Skryre, IKIT CLAW.
Okay.
Just look at him. What a handsome lad he is.
I gotta say, as far as like Skaven go, does actually look pretty badass. Like, guy's actually wearing armor. He's got a couple arms, looks like a couple different appendages. Clearly has had some shit done to him, you know. He's clearly had some extensions, you know, as it were. Yeah, he's not a pushover. It doesn't look like a lot of Skavens, you know. Obviously when you hear like a mighty Skaven, what does that mean? You know, it's a fucking rat man at the end of the day, right? But and we all know what that means. But this guy doesn't. He doesn't look like he's fucking around.
Giant, monstrous mechanical arms, complete with finger knives, check. Glowing things at the end of his massive warp halberd that also has a smaller halberd attached to it, absolutely. Huge pistol bolted at his waist, yup. And of course, metal skull mask. A more handsome ratkin you will never behold, and I'll tell you that right now. And you can hardly even tell that he's a semi-crippled burn victim beneath all of that armor.
Oh.
Yes. Good.
So you're telling me he basically got fucking Anakin Skywalkered at some point or another? I wonder what the stipulations behind that are going to be. I'm sure we're going to find out here, but I wonder if it is like literally like got left for dead and like mangled or something like that, man. Let's find out.
Beneath all of that armor. Yes. Good old IKIT. He's a character from all the way back in Skaven 4th edition, the very first proper army book the Skavens received. They were mentioned in Warhammer Armies all the way back in 3rd as well, but 4th was when they really started taking off and developed, well, what would eventually become the Skaven we know and love today. And frankly, the 4th edition Skaven army book is still the absolute best book the Skaven have ever received. It was Warhammer at the very height of its Warhammerness, and by God did I love it. In fact, I'm pretty sure I still have that army book lying around here somewhere, though considerably worse off for wear. I read that damn thing until the pages started falling out.
I imagine a lot of the those older edition books are probably like in good condition, kind of somewhat rare, unless, you know, and I assume a lot of people took good care of them too, don't get me wrong, but I know a lot of people obviously use them a lot too, right? Especially, you know, taking them, trading them around, whatever have you, right? And obviously I don't think they print them anymore. Maybe they do, correct me if I'm wrong. But I think those older editions, like really, you can read them online, or I think you can buy like digital copies and whatnot, but I don't think they print them, but please do let me know if they do still.
I read that damn thing until the pages started falling out. Now, poor old IKIT didn't get quite the attention he deserved all the way back then, since the book was primarily concerned with establishing the Skaven as a full-fledged race rather than focusing on individual characters. But of course, that is something that we can absolutely remedy today. And even all the way back then, he did get a little bit of fluff, I remember. For example, IKIT CLAW was the Warlock engineer credited with the invention of the mighty Doom Wheel. And no, we're going to use the old version. The new one is too meh. I don't like the new Doom Wheel. It looks like it could actually, function.
Wait, what?
That's not the point of Clan Skryre. Absolutely not. But we are deviating.
Technically, that's not the fucking... that's not the bit with any of the Skaven, none of their shit is supposed to function. It's really just up to chance that if it does or not, let's be honest. But when it does, holy shit, does it ever.
Skryre, absolutely not. But we are deviating somewhat from the point, are we not? So let us return back to IKIT CLAW, one of the handsomest little furry creatures to have ever singed his whiskers in the massive warp fortress beneath Skaven Blight. Like all of his fellow ratmen, IKIT CLAW had a clear vision of what his future was supposed to be. He knew, intrinsically, as all Skaven do, that he was the only worthwhile individual in the entire race, and that he would inevitably, eventually, be elevated to his rightful place above all other Skaven. Now, for 99.9% of Skaven, this turns out to be a dangerous illusion that usually ends up getting eaten by one of the myriad predators that find the Skaven to be just on the right side of crunchy with a good crust to them.
Yeah, let's be real here. The average Skaven is a complete pushover, for the lack of a better word. I mean, they're not hard to kill, they're deceitful, they're, they rely much on their stealth and their ability to backstab people more so than their ability to, straight up engage you in a fight. But, in the case of, again, IKIT here, I don't know what happened to him, but again, he does look like the fucking Darth Vader of of the Skaven, dude. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, I look at this guy and that's just who he reminds me of, dude. I don't know.
On the right side of crunchy with a good crust to them. Unfortunately, much of IKIT's early life is lost to myth and legend. Unsurprisingly, in all reality, because as mentioned, most Skaven do believe that it is their right to stand at the very top of society, but the overwhelming majority of them never even manage to grab hold of the first rung of that ladder. Never mind
also, you know how many ratmen there are.
Of the top. What we do know, though, is that the young IKIT CLAW went on globe-trotting adventures across most, if indeed not pretty much all, of the Warhammer world. And not just the old world, mind you, but trips all the way over to the new world in Lustria, and to the Dragon Empire of Cathay and faraway Nippon.
Jesus.
This ability to travel more or less at will across the Skaven Under-Empire suggests that even as a tiny little furred creature making its way out of the lowest reaches of Clan Skryre's massive warrens, IKIT's tinkering must have been very successful and very desirable. Few are the ratmen, indeed, who ever even see the outside of their birth warren. Never mind this citizen of the world nonsense that IKIT clearly had going. So he must have had plenty of warp tokens, and the only way I can imagine someone like IKIT acquiring them would be by making all manners of interesting trinkets and selling them to the highest bidder. And taking into consideration the usual proclivities of the Skaven Under-Empire, I'm imagining that his skills were primarily aimed towards the crafting of various forms of weaponry, with which one petty warlord or crime lord, or simply just a random Skaven, could use to turn somebody that he didn't like into ever so much bloody pudding scattered across the floor. For whilst, of course, the Skaven Under Empire is expansive in the extreme, traversing it is neither easy nor cheap.
So the Skaven Under Empire, like, to my understanding, it's obviously much different than like the Underway, right? That the dwarves and I guess the orcs, goblins to an extent use, right, as well. Is how does it differ, if I might ask? Like, what is the core differences, I guess, between those two methods of travel? Obviously, like I know, with the Underway, with the dwarves, I mean, that's much more conventional travel, at least from like what I could see with like the Total War games, for example. It looked a lot more conventional in a sense, like they still had to walk underneath. I just wonder how the Skaven are able to do that if, like, you know, you're obviously crossing continents, crossing oceans and whatnot. Like, what are the core differences, or is there some type of, you know, fucked way they do it, you know, without any other way to say it, you know? Somebody let me know, please.
Traversing it is neither easy nor cheap, nor safe for that matter. Merely just navigating the seemingly endless tunnels and countless side warrens without becoming hopelessly lost would take quite a bit of green. In this case, the green refers to warp tokens, the Skaven's equivalent of money, essentially.
Okay.
And food, money, essentially. And food, and fuel, and energy, and, well, everything in between, really. Skaven society runs off warpstone, and so an entrepreneuring young warlock engineer would have to have in his possession a lot of these little tokens to ensure his safe travels. And that, of course, is...
I guess that kind of answers the question. So it's done with the warp tokens, essentially, right? So, and those really do just like fuel Skaven society in every aspect, I suppose. And I guess they also like, yeah, consume them as well. And that's how you start seeing like some of these fucking deformed motherfuckers coming out, right? I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so I'm picturing kind of like, I don't even know, like a portal in a sense, something like to that degree. Again, specifics would be nice, guys. If you guys can let me know in the comments, really appreciate that.
Tokens to ensure his safe travels.
I'm genuinely curious how it's like,
and that, of course,
how they figured this out, you know? Goddamn.
IKIT had far grander ambitions than merely visiting these far-flung places, of course. He wished to learn everything there was to know about magic. Not as an esoterical, noncy-poncy silly thing like making sparks appear or tossing fireballs, anything like that. He viewed magic like what it truly was, a form of science, a force of nature that could be bridled and placed under the control of the Horned Rat's chosen people. And this is a very important distinction to make as well, for whilst IKIT is often mentioned or referred to as a sorcerer, or magic caster, a wizard of some kind, this is only partially true. Yes,
like a hybrid.
He does utilize magic, and yes, he has a near encyclopedic understanding of the various races' spells and how they perceive the winds of magic and how they utilize them, but he is far more so a scientist of these winds of magic than he is, say, a bright wizard, or a lore master of Hoeth, or a dwarven rune priest, or any else of these myriad different forms of interacting with chaos, which is, of course, at the heart of all magic in the Warhammer Fantasy universe. A fact that IKIT perhaps understands better than literally anyone else. For in reality, only the oldest and most experienced of Slann mage priests could possibly hope to even begin rivaling IKIT's sheer level of research and knowledge. Since, again, he didn't merely just travel to these places, he broke into their secret areas and stole all of their fancy stuff, their tomes of knowledge, their magical artifacts, and on more than one occasions, their actual wizards and priests as well, who were then brought back home to IKIT's labs for up-close study sessions.
Oh my god.
Now you might think that holy men and wizened old magic users would hold on to their secrets quite dearly, and certainly wouldn't give them over to a giant monstrous Skaven thing that has dragged you out of your bed in the middle of the night, tied you to a chair, and is now informing you as to the precise usage of the warpstone-tipped manual drill he's holding in clawed hands right now.
Like, I can only imagine getting captured by the Skaven is, it's probably one of the worst fates, you know, probably not the worst, you know, there's definitely worse ones, don't get me wrong, but let's be honest, I think just straight up death would be far more preferable. I mean, like, taking a look at it, you know, I mean, nothing I've seen from the Skaven makes me think that they're going to treat you decently in any shape, way, or form. I think they're going to get what they want from you, and then they're probably just going to eat your ass, like, quite literally at that point.
You will drill he's holding in clawed hands right now. But, as that image already probably paints, IKIT can be remarkably persuasive when he wants to. This is not to say, though, that IKIT is merely any old copyrat. No, far from it. Again, this is the key distinction between somebody that understands the nature of magic and some old fool who simply recites spells or old rituals from dusty books. IKIT understands the core component parts, and is therefore able to think to himself, okay, if spell A does this and spell B does this, then if I can combine the two, then I get to reaction C, which might just be infinitely more interesting than either A or B by themselves. This obviously required a huge amount of experimentation, which would have demanded yet further funding. And there is no such thing as a
and test subjects, I think, too, right?
Grant within the Skaven Under Empire. No sane Warlock engineer would ever lift so much as a clawed little toe to help one of his competitors. That would simply just be silly. Not to mention poor form as well. If you want to learn one of your competitors' secrets, then the only truly Skaven way to do that is to break into his workshop in the middle of the night and take them. The good old-fashioned way. Though there are those, of course, which stand above the fray and above the competition, and that may have a great deal to earn from having an innovative young Warlock engineer at his beck and call. And one of these was Lord Warlock Morskitar, the head honcho of Clan Skryre. There were none in the clan with more influence and more wealth than he.
Oh, shit.
And through IKIT's various inventions, he drew his beneficent gaze upon him. Now, this was a very dangerous thing indeed, because when the ruler of
definitely don't think I heard of that guy either.
A young upstart, there is essentially only two choices available.
Again, most of my knowledge so far, guys, from the Skaven comes from the little that we've seen, like previous videos, and of course, you know, I guess just like us fighting them in like Total War, right? But besides that, you know, I really don't know much about them, and I've never played them in Total War either. Maybe I should, and I probably actually learn a lot doing that. So maybe our next campaign will be the Skaven. You know, we'll obviously have another vote, but I think that could be interesting, you know?
Clan sees a young upstart, there is essentially only two choices available to him. One, crush the youngling's skull beneath a clawed foot before he gets too much in the way of influence and becomes a threat. Or B, he's too useful to kill, and therefore he is to be taken under the patronage of the lord in question. Luckily for IKIT, he had proven himself extremely worthwhile so far, and so he got to go with the B course. This was going to turn out to be a very wise decision from Lord Morskitar, and would eventually see him as the second most powerful individual on the Council of 13.
I can see why.
This elevated position still lay quite a bit in the future. Whilst Morskitar was sponsoring IKIT's various experiments and his travels across the world, IKIT developed, amongst other things, as we know, the Skaven Doom Wheel, one of his more,
I believe, okay, I don't think we've fought a Doom Wheel, but I believe they are in Total War, and I believe I've seen them in, like, enemy armies. You know what I mean? But we haven't fought one, I don't think. I think I saw it and I was like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, but I don't think we actually got the opportunity to see what it exactly did. So this is gonna be interesting. I guess we're gonna learn about it first before seeing it in practice.
Doom Wheel, one of his more huge and awesome looking inventions, absolutely. He also is rumored to have had more than a hand or two in the development of many other forms of Skaven weaponry as well, though during these experiments he did occasionally have a handful of
accidents
here and there. IKIT burned down more than his fair share of laboratories over the course of his career. The most famous mishap, of course, being the one that singed the flesh and fur off his skull and reduced his left arm to a withered, burned wreck of a limb.
Oh my God.
He compensated, of course, and this little mishap never even once discouraged him from continuing his adventures in the fields of science.
At least he's ambitious.
His left arm, after all, when compared to the near limitless possibilities of crafting ever larger explosive devices. And hey, everything's got a silver lining, right? Well, he had been working on a...
I like how the Skaven are just like the fucking Al-Qaeda of just like the fantasy universe, dude. Like, it's fucking crazy to me. Like, they literally are, though. They're just out here making like IEDs and shit, like for like their own gain, you know. And it's not even like there's a causation for like half the shit they do. Half the shit they do is just like purely on the individual level, and just somehow it benefits the greater chaos as a whole, you know. Like, it's fucking, it's wretched. But then when the like a truly devious Skaven comes into play, you know, clearly shit goes down. You know, you guys have told me of like, obviously they're making like A-bombs essentially, right? It's like, what the fuck?
Everything's got a silver lining, right? Well, he had been working on a mechanical suit of armor, and seeing as he had almost completely managed to cripple himself with his own experiments, and had to live in agonizing pain for the foreseeable future, his iron frame armor came in quite handy. Not only is his arm, of course, a massive mechanical claw, which houses a small warp fire thrower, by the way, but the frame also enhances the rest of his body's functions. He is far stronger than any Skaven has any right to be, and is able to wield his magic glaive, the Storm Demon, with ferocious speed and power. Additionally, the iron frame provides
also one-handed too, looks like, largely,
both against more mundane threats like blades, knives, and venomed assassin's daggers, and also arcane dangers. IKIT CLAW knows everything there is to know about magic, and he certainly understands the joy of turning an enemy into a merrily dancing marionette engulfed in warp flames. He knows enough about that fate, in particular, by the way, to wish to avoid it ever happening again, and so he worked plentiful magic wards into his armor. In many ways, IKIT CLAW today is essentially a miniature walking laboratory, containing all of his more successful and, relatively speaking, safe inventions. Amongst which, by the way, I can only assume is a repository of his revolutionary hair regrowth formula. Because, as you may remember, during one of his...
Man, if only they could engage in some form of diplomacy. Think about it, man. The Skaven could absolutely market that shit to to the old world in general. Let's be honest here. I feel like many in the Empire would be more than willing to make a purchase. He just needs to I think he just needs an agent. You know what I mean? Now, as hard as that may be to find, you find somebody that is willing to peddle some shit for you, and it's like that's not even like outright malicious. As long as he doesn't make it outright malicious. But come on now. Just want a bit of a hairy growth cream. Come on. It's a good business model right there.
As you may remember, during one of his more enthusiastic experiments, he zapped
thinking small time here.
To the point of scorching both the flesh and fur of most of his body, including his head and face. That's why he's wearing the fancy iron mask. And yet, these days, IKIT is sporting a fine, illustrious hide of white fur.
Oh my
Which
God.
raises some questions in and of itself. White-furred Skavens are few and far between, and essentially only exist within the ranks of the Grey Seers or the Council's albino guards. And IKIT, of course, is neither of those things. Nor do you have to be a white or grey-furred Skaven to wield magic. The secretive clan Eshin, for example, possess their own sorcerers, and Lord Skrolk of Clan Pestilence is living, at least in a certain
way,
proof that yes, indeed, even the more normally coloured multitudes of Skavendom can wield the arcane arts.
Okay.
In my humble opinion, the reason why he is now a white-furred Skaven is because whoever did his redesign back in the 7th edition either didn't know the significance behind white fur, or thought that only white-furred Skaven could cast magic. Either or, it was a little bit of a fuck-up, and I think that is probably the most likely and lore-friendly explanation, because
I see. So it was actually just a lore fuck up in the book. Like somebody messed up. Okay, I see. Okay. See, I thought he just like straight up just like butchered one of those like albino Skaven and just like wore his like fur or something like that. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. That's what I was thinking, but no, it's actually just a writer's mistake. Oopsie. And obviously that like comes back to like obviously, well, Warhammer in general being decades old at this point. I believe back in the day there were just so many writers, I guess like being subbed in and out and like working on different things. So like continuity was a lot harder to get down, and it wasn't until later on that they eventually did get that continuity locked in. And I guess that that lore kind of locked in, but it did take them some time, unfortunately, from what I hear.
I think that is probably the most likely and lore-friendly explanation, because, you see, the Graces do not like competition, and if, indeed, IKIT was born with white fur, he would invariably have been introduced into their circles. They would not have allowed a white-furred Skaven, particularly not one with such a ferocious hunger for magic knowledge, toddle about uncontrolled. To do that, you are either going to have to be an extremely secretive caster, as in the case of Clan Eshin, or a very powerful one, as in the case of Lord Skrolk. As it turns out, if you have the ability to turn anyone who so much as touches you into a leper with minutes left to live, then, well, you have a fair bit of protection against anyone fucking with you.
That's true.
But arguments over fur color aside, let us then move on to the grand rise of Clan Skryre. And most importantly of all, the moment when Morskitar's bet and his faith, quote-unquote, in IKIT paid off in truckloads. And like all good Skaven stories, this one starts with a pinch of political intrigue. For you see, Clan Pestilence, after the absolutely rip-roaring success of the Black Death, which had almost managed to turn the entirety of the Empire into one vast Skaven over-Empire domain,
Oh my god.
Pestilence tried to repeat their success with the Red Pox and the
I don't really know too much about 40k Old World, right? Learning more, right? And it is genuinely one of my out of the two, I guess like Age of Sigmar and Old World. Again, you guys know me, I really enjoy Old World, and especially just based on the Total War games, that's really all we have currently right now in terms of those games. That's kind of what I like started learning about first, I suppose, in a way. Not to say Age of Sigmar isn't cool, you know, I just don't know a whole lot about it compared to Old World at the moment. But no, man, just I feel like when exactly did those plagues like happen, I guess, you know what I mean? And how detrimental were they? Like, because clearly that sounds like the bubonic plague, you know, there's a clear like distinguish there, clear relation there, and obviously that took out 75% of Europe. So like what are we talking number wise for this pox? And what was the other one? Hold on, let me just go back a little bit there.
The absolutely
there's the pox, and which is the other one?
Death,
the Black Death.
Almost
it literally just gets called the Black Death.
The entirety of the Empire into one vast Skaven over-Empire domain. Pestilence tried to repeat their success with the Red Pox and the invasion of Bretonnia. But unfortunately for Pestilence, the pox proved to be far lesser of a malady than the Black Death. For comparison, the Black Death ravaged the Empire from 600 to 1111 Imperial calendar, during which time the only thing that stopped the Skaven from taking over the entirety of the human lands was, as usual, their own bickering and infighting. Whereas...
So that was the pox, but the Black Death, and I guess which one, too, was more successful? You know what I mean? I guess in terms of... for the Skaven, right? I mean, clearly it's a bad time for everyone else. I'm assuming it probably affected all races to some degree, right? Because they're ultimately trying to inhabit the overworld, right? Inhabit just the mainland, right? So it's, I assume to some degree it probably affected each race. Some races might have fared better than others. But yeah, somebody tell me more about that. Exactly what did it, I mean, besides the obvious, the red pox, but like, what exactly did it do to each race? I'm assuming the same thing, but were any races immune besides the Skaven, or, you know, did everyone kind of get it? You know what I mean? Like, were lizardmen also getting this too? You know what I mean? Like,
the pox only lasted from 1786 to 1812 of the imperial calendar, and ended with an embarrassing and total defeat for the forces of the Ratmen. Over the course of the next 40-odd years, this failure saw Clan Pestilence position within the Council of 13 significantly weakened, and many of their enemies, they were all too happy to take advantage of that. Clan Pestilence had never been one for creating allies where there were opportunities to make enemies instead, or corpses preferably, and they were about to get a big old dose of their own medicine. It all came to a head in 1850, when the Council of 13 was sufficiently split for those in opposition to Clan Pestilence to demand that the lords of Clan Pestilence relinquish their seats upon the council and abandon their positions of power, which, somewhat unsurprisingly, they refused to do.
Right.
This led to a massive and sudden blossoming of violence within Skavenblight, the capital of the Under Empire, as both parties, frankly, had seen this coming and had prepared their armies to take advantage of the chaos. As the violence continued to ebb back and forth, with the albino sturm vermin of the council fighting in the streets against the plague monks of pestilence, Clan Skryre withdrew into their own armored compound within Skaven Blight.
My God.
Where Morskitar and IKIT were preparing their own countermoves. When IKIT was well and truly ready, having marshaled all of his considerable military might, he led a huge horde of Skryre out from their compounds with weapon teams, Jeziles, doom wheels, and warp fire throwers at the fore. He burned, blasted, and ratata'd a path through all opposition, eventually claiming the council chambers for Skryre and his lord Morskitar.
Now, mind you, I was obviously the Empire when we played last, but those warp throwers, man, those warp fire throwers in urban combat are fucking nuts. Yeah, those, like, straight up OP. Like, the range is pretty good on them, all things considered, for what they are. Like, arguably, it's arguably, like, almost insane, the range on those things, but makes sense. But, goddamn, if you are just a humanoid target, even if you've got armor on, like you're just getting melted. Like there's really nothing you can do to stop it. Best thing you can do is get in there close with Cav or something, hit those gun teams. But you know, Skaven fighting Skaven, you know, I'm not really too sure what Clan Pestilence, besides like Plague Monks and obviously Plague Monks, but I'm not too sure what else they really have at their disposal. And it doesn't sound to me like Skaven really have cavalry. I think they have like I guess like the rat ogres and stuff would be like the closest sort of thing, but like I don't think they actually have like a dedicated cav unit, you know what I mean? Do they? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong.
The council chambers for Skryre and his lord Morskitar, who then immediately, of course, declared himself the Lord of Skaven Blight and ordered all the warring parties to step down and accept his authority. Unfortunately, Lord Morskitar had left it a little bit too late. He had undoubtedly hoped to strike like a lightning bolt from a clear sky, sweep away all opposition, and declare himself the undisputed ruler of the capital of Skavendom. Unfortunately, by the time he saw the opportunity to strike, most of the council had already fled to their own strongpoints, and so whilst Morskitar was undeniably in control of Skaven Blight, all of his political opposition, the very ones he was relying on either murdering or threatening into supporting him, were all fled, and soon launched their own rival claims of true legitimacy. What continued then was the Second Skaven Civil War, which was going to rage for nigh on 400 years.
Holy shit.
And if left to their own devices, the little furred fiends may have carried on with their civil war for all eternity. It only stopped with the direct intervention of the great horned rat himself. But this is, of course, of little real consequence to IKIT CLAW. From his perspective...
Wait. You're telling me that, like, the fucking Skaven god actually, like, manifested and put an end to this civil war that was occurring for 400 fucking years? That's actually a canon event? He's probably going to mention here, but Jesus Christ, the circumstances of that must have been insane. Imagine your god coming down and telling you guys to stop fucking around. Like, and you're Skaven. Like, the Skaven god is telling you that. Like, that's bad, man.
This is, of course, of little real consequence to IKIT CLAW. From his perspective, this was all rather fantastic. With Lord Morskitar in command of Skaven Blight, that meant that IKIT had every opportunity to undergo some rather drastic extensions of his laboratory, and he was put in charge of growing the warpstone forges beneath the Skaven capital. Eventually, what had started out as relatively modest Skryre warrens grew into some of the largest research yards in the entirety of Skavendom.
Damn.
One might have thought that Skaven Blight would have learned its lesson after almost having been destroyed by Skaven ingenuity in the past, but It's remarkable what a change of leadership can do, especially a change of leadership headed up by an army of warp fire throwers. Regardless,
that is correct.
IKIT now had all the money in the world,
sadly,
and all of the slaves to test his new inventions upon as well, and made leaps and bounds in Skaven weapon technology, improving upon and refining many of their more lethal inventions, until finally, of course, coming up with the dual crowning jewels in IKIT's crown. One of which is the rather infamous Doom Sphere, and the other, the Morskitar engine. Let us begin with the sphere, shall we? The Doom Sphere was essentially a very, very, very large bomb. More akin to an atom bomb in all due reality.
Okay.
Nearly a big old
This is what you guys were saying. Okay.
And to further emphasize the destructive effect of the Doom Sphere, it was also strategically placed on a major fault line beneath the Dwarven Mountains.
Oh my
If it
god.
hadn't been for the brave intervention of a dwarven engineer by the name of Clarak Bronzenhammer, IKIT would have detonated the device and caused what remained of the Dwarf Empire to simply just
cease to
disappear
be.
into the ground, essentially, as world-shattering earthquakes would have rocked the World-Edge Mountains once more, like during the time of woe. And seeing as that...
Well, and not only that, but think of like the repercussions on the rest of the continent because of that. Now, like even just environmentally, right? Like mass earthquakes there means that like fault lines everywhere else are obviously being fucked up. So probably earthquakes on the same continent, you know, as tectonic plates shift, right? So you're not only fucking up the dwarves, you're probably fucking up to some degree the Empire, right? And everyone else on the continent. And not only that too, but the dwarves are, you know, obviously a big source of trade, a big source of help for the Empire, right? That would have been absolutely catastrophic, like for lack of a better word. And the dwarves wouldn't have been extinct, right? Like I believe dwarven tribes do exist large in many places throughout the old world, but that is like their largest seat of government. And I guess like Caracas as a core, I believe, is the capital there. Yeah, losing that would have just been kind of the nail in the coffin. I think definitely for the dwarves as a greater whole, and probably by extension of that, the Empire without dwarven help, right?
Once more, like during the time of woe. And seeing as that event almost crushed the Dwarf Empire at the height of its power, yeah, I think to say that the successful detonation of the Doom Sphere would probably have finished the job.
Yeah.
As for the Morskitar engine, well, it was essentially a my penis is larger than your penis move from IKIT CLAW. You see, the Grey Seas had come up with a plan to pull Morslib, the massive moon of the Warhammer world said to be made out of pure warpstone, closer to the planet's surface. They reckoned that this would make their own powers considerably greater, and that it would be an act that would greatly please the
Get ready for tsunamis, holy shit.
It would also, in all due likelihood, have led to rampant mutations across the entire Warhammer world, and plunged the entire godforsaken place into chaos once more, which is why the Slan mage priests tried so very damn hard to stop it, though in the end they did fail. This was of course a momentous achievement, something that seemed set to cement the Grey Sea's positions of power over Skavendom for all eternity. And so IKIT decided to build the largest cannon the world has ever seen and fire it at the moon. And hey, he succeeded beyond his own wildest imagination.
So they brought the moon closer. it kind of for Skavendom, it kind of fucked them up a little bit, but it also kind of cemented that clan's power. And so IKIT here, just out of pure spite, just decided to shoot a cannon at it. How the fuck did he manage to hit the moon with a cannon like this? What, just like a bunch of warp stone just like juiced up into it? And what was the effect of this, you know? Like what could he possibly have done from, like what could this have possibly done in the long term? I'm genuinely curious here. Let's find out.
And hey, he succeeded beyond his own wildest imagination. Unfortunately, IKIT's plan was apparently to smash a nice big chunk of the moon loose, allowing ginormous warpstone meteorites to hammer down into the Earth's surface, and then he could rush over to claim them. This would be like, you know, knocking a few hundred thousand tons of gold loose off the moon, presuming the moon was made out of solid gold, and then rushing over to grab it. It would have been rather useful, to put it mildly. Unfortunately, IKIT had outdone himself, and instead of simply just blasting a chunk out of the moon,
he blew it up.
The chunk was a little bit too large. And if it weren't for Mazdamundi and Lord Croak of the Lizardmen sacrificing themselves to stop it, the chunk would probably have led to the utter annihilation of the entire world. A wasted effort, if you ask me, considering the world ended shortly thereafter regardless, but hey, I suppose we needed something for the two old wizened Slan mage priests to do as well during the apocalypse. Meanwhile, IKIT, of course, was just fine and still resolutely determined to demonstrate the size of his winker by infiltrating and blowing apart Nagasha's grand, indestructible Black Pyramid. Well, indestructible only up until the point of IKIT pressing the boom button on his remote detonator, that is. And so, after nearly having single-handedly destroyed the Dwarven Empire, after having built and fired a cannon at the moon that almost destroyed the Earth, and after having blown chunks out of an indestructible temple structure, what was IKIT CLAW's reward, you ask? How was he transported into Age of Shitmar after the end of the end times?
Age of Shitmar, whoa.
After all of that, IKIT CLAW's model is today used to represent nothing more than a standard run-of-the-mill Warlock engineer, whilst one of his most...
Really? That seems kind of wasteful, I'm not gonna lie. That seems like a Games Workshop L right there, if I've ever heard one, I'm not gonna lie. Like, just, you know, it seems like a very sick character, and just to have him go to waste in the new world, and I guess in the new tabletop as well, like that's and you can use his model, but he's just some bitch basic Warlock engineer. Like, what? And this is the guy, like, and he's not around. Crazy. You think out of anyone to survive Skaven wise, it'd be him, you know? He'd find a way, right?
Run-of-the-mill Warlock engineer, whilst one of his most aggressive competitors, Tanquil, may the horned rat ever piss on his soul, has not only a model, but his very own rules in Age of Sigmar as well. I can almost hear IKIT spinning in his grave from here, but hopefully the coming resurgence of Warhammer Fantasy will reintroduce this lovely clawed fiend, and hopefully they'll fix his fur color in the process. That'd be neat. With that, I'll wrap up this lore video on IKIT CLAW, Chief Warlock of Clan Skryre, and creator of not one, but two Doomsday devices. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching. If you liked the video, please do consider sharing it around, liking, and subscribing. Oh, and whilst I'm shilling, hit the fucking bell as well. Because God knows, YouTube isn't going to tell you about my videos if you don't.
Yeah, that is true. Oh my god, wow. Okay, that was a great video, guys. I really enjoyed that one. What a fucking weird guy. And this is the guy that also created, like, the equivalent of the A-bomb in fucking fantasy world, and you guys were telling me about that. I had no idea it was actually IKIT, so apparently I guess I knew a little bit more about him than I first thought, I suppose, after watching that video there. But that was a great video by Arch. Really enjoyed that, of course. Yeah, if you guys enjoyed this reaction, hit that like button, of course, subscribe for more content from me, and of course leave recommendations down in the comments below. Andrew, really appreciate that recommendation. This was a great video, and yeah, big thank you to all of our members, all of our Hastati, our Triarii, our Principe, Dagenhart, of course our Prefects, Andrew, Hobbit, B-Coon, and Psychotic Duck. Yeah, I appreciate you guys. Join our Discord. Don't know if I just said that, but do it if you're not in it. Appreciate that, guys. You know, hit the bell button, hit the fucking bell button, as it were, you know what I'm saying? And yeah, without any further delay, guys, this has been Centurion, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace, guys.